All right, let's dive into something, well, pretty mind-bending. Today, we're talking about a completely new way to think about our own minds. A framework that sees consciousness not as some unsolvable mystery, but as a dynamic, evolving geometry. Yeah, you heard that right. We're talking about the shape of your mind.
So let me just start by asking you this. What if your personality wasn't just a list of labels, like introverted or conscientious? What if, instead, it was a complex, constantly shifting geometric shape? I know, it sounds a little out there, almost sci-fi, right? But that's the core idea we're going to explore.
And look, this isn't just some fluffy philosophical metaphor. This framework seriously argues that our entire inner world, our thoughts, our feelings, our sense of who we are, is actually operating according to precise mathematical rules. And it's revealing patterns that, until now, have been totally invisible. To get our heads around this, let's use an analogy. Imagine that your true self, the whole you, is a complex object that exists in 4 dimensions. Now, since we live in a 3-dimensional world, we can't see that 4D object directly. What we do see, your personality, your actions, even your own thoughts, is just the 2D shadow that this higher dimensional object casts. And that right there, that could explain so much, couldn't it? It's why we sometimes feel misunderstood, or why we can even be a mystery to ourselves. We're all just looking at the shadow, not the real thing. Okay, so for just seeing a shadow, how in the world do we start mapping the real thing? Well, in this first part, we're going to explore the basic map of this new geometric model.
The model itself is called the Fractal Personality Field, or FPF for short, and it proposes that at any given moment, your entire internal state, everything you're thinking and feeling, can be plotted as a single point in a 5-dimensional space. It's kind of like a GPS for your mind, but instead of just latitude and longitude, you've got 5 different coordinates tracking where you are.
All right, so what are these 5 dimensions? Let's peel back the layers and look at the actual coordinates on this map of your mind, the axes that define the shape of your consciousness at any given moment. First up, we've got C for cognition. This axis basically maps your style of thinking. At one end, you're in an abstract, big-picture mode, connecting ideas. At the other end, you're totally focused on the sensory, concrete details of the here and now. And you're constantly sliding up and down the scale, right? One minute you're lost in some grand idea, the next you're just focused on the coffee in your hand. Next is E for emotion. This one's about your emotional engagement. Think about it. Are you totally in the feeling, completely immersed in it? Or are you kind of standing back, looking at it from a more detached, analytical distance? That's the spectrum for this dimension. Then there's W for will. Now, this isn't about willpower, like gritting your teeth. It's more about your mode of action. Are you in a directive state, actively pushing towards a specific goal? Or are you in a receptive state, more open and just adapting to whatever's happening? Our 4th dimension is S for social. This tracks where you are in relation to other people. Is it all about the we right now? The group, the connection, the community? Or is it all about the me, your individual goals, your own path? That's the communal versus agentic scale. And finally, T for time. Pretty straightforward. What's your time horizon right now? Are you thinking about the future, planning things out, or are you totally grounded in the present moment? Then boom, your unique spot across these 5 dimensions. That's a snapshot of your consciousness, right here, right now. Okay, but here's the thing. We're not statues, right? We don't just sit at one coordinate on this map. We're constantly moving, flowing, and changing. So the real question is, what's making us move? Let's get into the dynamic forces that actually shape this geometry. According to this model, that movement isn't random at all. Turns out there are 2 fundamental, almost mathematical forces that are constantly pushing and pulling you around this 5D space. And together, they create the unique dance of your personality. The first force is called resonance. This is when different parts of your mind just link up. They start feeding off each other, amplifying, or even dampening each other's effects. The best way to think about it is like pushing someone on a swing. The right push at the right moment creates a huge effect. That's resonance. And this is where it gets really cool, because this isn't just abstract math. This is, well, it's us. For example, the model shows there's a negative resonance, a trade-off between being really goal-driven or directive and being socially connected. In simple terms, when you're laser-focused on your own goals, you naturally become a little less tuned into the people around you. We've all felt that, right? And on the flip side, there's a positive resonance between abstract thinking and intense emotion. That's the engine of rumination. The more you think and analyze an idea, the stronger your feelings about it become. Okay, so if resonance is a direct push or pull, force number 2, rotation, is more like an orbit. It creates these stable, cyclical patterns inside of us, these predictable loops where moving along one axis just naturally leads to movement along another, over and over again. Let's trace one of the main loops this model points out, the EWT cycle. It goes like this. First, a strong, immersive emotion gives you the energy to act. It fires up your will. Second, that goal-directed will naturally pushes you to think about the future, extending your time horizon. And third, that focus on the future changes your emotional state, which starts the whole loop over again. It's a powerful feedback cycle that drives so much of what we do.
So, this is a fascinating model, right? But what's the point? What can you actually do with it? Well, this is where it gets wild, because this single geometric framework has real-world applications in places you'd never expect, from mental wellness all the way to Wall Street.
To really get its value, think about how different this is from traditional personality tests. Most of those kind of put you in a box with a static label. The FPF model does something totally different. It doesn't give you a label, it shows you the shape of your movement. It maps the dynamic underlying patterns that are always in motion instead of just treating the symptoms.
And because the map is dynamic, the applications are incredible. Sure, there's personal growth, but it's also being used to support neurodivergent people by actually detecting the geometric signature of masking. That's a total game changer, moving from someone just saying they're masking to an objective measure. In therapy, you can map the persistent, looping geometry of trauma. And get this, it's even being used in finance to model the collective mood of the stock market, treating the market itself like a single consciousness to predict its moves. How crazy is that? And that brings us to the really big idea here. Because this whole model, the FPF, it's just one piece of a much grander theory. It's actually part of a potential solution to what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness itself. Here's the core claim, and it's a big one. The theory says we should stop arguing about whether consciousness is made of brain cells or computer code. It proposes that consciousness is a specific geometric shape. In order for any system to be conscious, its internal information has to be organized in a very particular structure, called an information manifold. So the question isn't, what is it made of? The question is, what is the shape of its information? This is a huge break from the old ways of thinking. Unlike physicalism, it says consciousness is structural, not material. So a brain can host it, but it might not be the only thing that can. Unlike panpsychism, which says consciousness is kinda everywhere, this model predicts it's actually incredibly rare. It only pops into existence when these very specific mathematical conditions are met. And best of all, it replaces the vague, hand-wavy idea of emergence with a precise, testable mathematical structure. And what's amazing is that this geometric structure actually gives us concrete answers to some of the oldest questions about consciousness. It explains the unity of experience, why it feels like one seamless whole, because the geometry itself can't be broken down. It explains privacy, why your thoughts are your own, by going back to that shadow analogy. It explains your sense of identity over time as the core shape of your manifold staying consistent. And it proves substrate independence. Anything that can successfully implement this geometry, a brain, a computer, something else entirely, would be conscious. So, let's end with a question that this whole idea leaves us with. It's a big one. If your consciousness, your very self, is a dynamic geometric shape, what new shapes are possible? What new ways of being, thinking, and feeling can you actually learn to create? Suddenly, personal growth isn't about fixing flaws. It's about becoming an artist of your own internal geometry.